Ronayne.
Hey, it's just good to sort of
All right.
a reunion here.
Yeah, we want to get through this agenda if we can. Thank you as well for joining us. We've got some guests in the room. We will make some introductions in just a moment. But again, thank you everyone for our first meeting of this council in 2023. Lots of activity going on. We've had conversations off to the side, especially with the subcommittee chairs, to work through things. But then one of the important agenda items today, of course, is to hear from the county executive, his agenda, some of the early work, early discoveries, and he'll get a chance, if he doesn't know you all, get a chance to get to know you a lot better over the course of this year. So, it's 1:41, I believe we called the meeting to order. Can we take a roll, please?
We shall. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Based on who I see in the room, it appears we have a quorum, so I'm going to call the roll call. Chair Taylor?
Here.
The Honorable Mayor Blackwell? Here. Stephen Cavanis?
Here.
Reverend Kenneth Chalker?
Here.
Habiba Grimes? Here. Dr. Heidi Gullett?
Here.
Randell McShepard?
Here.
Marcia Maccabee?
Here.
Dr. Modlin is not here, but we hear through the grapevine he may be in the garage. So we expect him to be here
He
shortly.
needs a lifeline, let us know.
That's how rumors get started.
That's our representative. Levine Ross. Glenn Shoemate appears not to be here at the moment. Yanela Sims.
Here.
Sheila Wright appears not to be here at the moment. Janice Contreras has an excused absence, as does Colleen Cotter. So we do have a quorum, and if I can take a moment of privilege, if I may. Since our last meeting, unfortunately, we received the resignation of Subcommittee Chair India Pierce-Lee. I just want to take a moment to publicly thank Ms. Pierce-Lee for her hard work and her dedication, not only to this committee, but to the Criminal Justice Subcommittee. She will be very, very much missed, but we wish her all the best in her new and exciting role as Executive Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer for Cuyahoga Community College. And I had the pleasure of seeing her where I saw a number of you this past Thursday when I had the honor of appearing on behalf of our executive at the Seder dinner. And India had a smile from ear to ear on her face. So we believe she is happy and wish her all the best.
100% agreed. Thank you, and I'm sorry, please.
Moving some hair that shouldn't be right there.
I shouldn't have called you out. My apologies. You know how this works. Councilwoman Conwell, good afternoon.
Good
as well.
afternoon.
Anything you'd like to, just other than saying hello, anything you'd like to say before
Just
we get
saying
started?
hello, if I have some invited guests that will be on the agenda later, and we can talk a little bit more then.
Okay, great, thank you. So as mentioned, we have an administration that is off to a strong start in this new county executive administration. It is important that we hear from the county executive in full today. We will have opportunities, of course, over time to hear more from County Executive Ronayne. But this will be an open conversation. We recognize, because this is first, we want to be gentle. We recognize that these conversations are just that, right? These are discussions. This is not a session to attack or to go after, but we question in a polite way because this equity conversation is an important conversation. Commitments have been made and they have been strong commitments. So I want to hear from the county executive, not only from that standpoint, but anything else that might be on his mind to this point.
Well, thank you, Eddie, and Mr. Chair. I just first want to thank you and Naila. I've met with both of you a couple times, talked over the phone about what the work of this committee is about. So your chair and our senior lead on the staff have kept this committee kind of in my forefront of eyes just in the first quarter before we met. So I want to thank you guys for that. And thank everybody who dedicates their time to what we're all about here. I really, really greatly appreciate, frankly, the appointment of all of you. And not sure all the appointing authorities to this, but if it's my predecessor in full, he did a hell of a job. If it's council and exec, they did a great job together. This is a great, great team. And I took a couple minutes to get around the table and say hello to all of you. And to our guests here today, I want to hear from you. But it's really, really a sort of testament to the priority by way of the people that are on this particular commission. So thank you for serving. And I hope that the term ahead is fruitful for you. And I know that there are a couple people who've expressed some need to eventually transition off, but I hope many of you can kind of renew and help us with our focus in the future. Let me speak a little bit about, I think, three things. One is what I came into this job thinking, what I've learned since, and what I've been acting on. And then I want to have just a little bit of a conversation first, I think most importantly, listening to what your priorities are, but I'll offer you some thoughts about things that I've observed in this administration that perhaps we could put to work in the Citizens Advisory Council on Equity. If I don't go any further, I think the most important thing I can say to you at the very outset of this is I believe in what we're doing. I believe that we have had the problem of systemic racism is truly, truly a public health crisis. So I'm glad that council came together a couple years back and declared that. Thank you, Yvonne. I know you're not representing all necessarily, but thank you to you and to your other 10 representatives on council for clearly stating that, making it a public priority. Now it's about what we do with it. But I want you to know as a county exec and as a leader in this county administration, where I stand with you. And you wouldn't be here if you didn't also stand with that objective forefront in your mind. Coming into this administration, my background, just for those who don't know me too well, although I know most of you pretty well, I've been lucky to live in this city and serve in this city since my graduate schooling at Cleveland State University. And I've said a couple times back on the trail, but I'll say it many times anybody will listen. One of my formative moments out of the Cleveland State Levin College down the street, where I studied city planning under Norman Krumholtz, who was the planning director under mayors Kucinich, Stokes, and Perk, three very different mayors. But I got to meet 2 out of 3 of them through the context of that class, Mayor Stokes and Kucinich. And one day, the great Carl Stokes came into our class and he moderated a class. And I, as a graduate student, stepped into the aisle and said, Mayor, would you ever have coffee with a student? And a few of you have heard me say this before, but he said yes. And within a week, we were having coffee up at Shaker Square, Bika. And I always say that I was in such awe of being there as a student sitting in front of a mayor like Mayor Stokes. I didn't, because I was in awe, I didn't remember every single message in those 30 minutes, but I remembered the last one when he said to me, change comes in inches in this town. Change comes in inches. And a few of you have heard this before, but I'll say it again. It's both haunted me and motivated me. And I think it goes right to the core of what we're about here, that we have unfortunately moved too slow in this community on progress as it relates particularly to race, justice, economic opportunity. And yet I think we also have to continue to be in the iteration of building trust. You know, I think that's the other thing that in those few words the mayor was saying comes in inches. And we've got to build trust and we've got to move at deliberate speed together. So it moved me into public service. I actually started here at the county right after, but within weeks of that conversation with Carl, I started here with the county and the County Planning Commission, and I worked then for Mayors McCormick and Campbell in subsequent terms with their administrations. What I learned working for the county, I learned how powerful this community is as a group when we work together. We were working to implement what was then called the Workforce Reconciliation Act. It was crassly called, I wouldn't call it this if I was naming it or working today in this space, but it was crassly called Welfare to Work. But what it was helping people meet opportunities, and the corporate community, working with the nonprofit community, working with the public sector, worked together to help people with pathways. What I learned as a young county planner tasked to certain items was that there are barriers that are formidable and there are barriers that are simpler. Some of the simpler barriers that we found we were able to flatten were access to daycare, access to transportation, access to workforce training opportunities. Those were probably some of the low-hanging fruit. The higher-hanging fruit is making sure that we had quality education for all, that we had safe and vibrant communities where there was work in the community, and that there was access to that work across the races. That was, I think, some of the more elusive work that we were working on, and it's still the work of today. But I got a good primer on county work coming right out of graduate school. And so to my fellow county workers, I say it's nice to be coming home. The matters of where I went after that was at City Hall with Mayor Campbell, and fell in love all over again with the city that I already lived in. I lived in the city of Cleveland as a county worker, but I worked for that in the city as a planning director, and later as the chief development officer and chief of staff. And I worked with a lot of you. I've worked with you at various points, many of you at my county stint and at our city stint. And then the last 16 years I worked out in University Circle, We focused a lot on education opportunities, early learning opportunities, high school apprentice opportunities, small business opportunities, and a few of you have spoken to classes and been a part of it. But the work that got done wasn't always enough. I look at Glenn Shoemate, who kept me honest about working more on job for particularly persons of color as it related particularly in the construction industry. And there wasn't enough of that. There wasn't enough contracting. So the work, to my view, is still a work in progress, and that's why I'm happy to be here as a part of this commission and committee. Let me talk, that's a little bit on background. Sorry for the extended, but it tells you a little bit about who I am and what I intend to do. On the campaign, a few of you joined up with me at various intervals just to have debates and community dialogues, and you learn a lot if you listen out on the trail for 18 months. I met a lot of you in your capacities as chairs of boards and members of different nonprofits and others around town. What I heard early on was the need to focus on the matter of health. And again, racism as a public health crisis is a big part of this. But as health goes, what I was learning and hearing on the trail was our communities had to be equitably healthy. In other words, our communities, there's great disparity in health outcomes. Our citizens had great disparity in health outcomes. Our justice system has a great disparity in health outcomes. Our work opportunities and economy has great disparities as it relates to the health of our economy, and even our government needs to be healthier. So I put together a platform that was centered on just that, on the health of our people, the health of our communities, the health of our economy, the health of our justice system, and the health of our government. So what does that mean? Well, if you look at disparities community by community, two wonderful communities in Cuyahoga County, the neighborhood of Huff and the village of Hunting Valley, 20 minutes away, less than 20 miles away, the richest community in the state of Ohio in the form of Hunting Valley. And I'm just using Huff as an example. I could use many of my neighbors in and around the eastern parts of Cleveland and the first ring suburbs, but the average lifespan difference, if you were born in Huff versus being born in Hunting Valley, was 20 years. Right? So that right there tells you there's something wrong, and we've got to work on that.
5 years, 5 miles apart.
5 miles, yeah.
Shaker Heights. Same.
Exactly, right,
Yeah.
exactly. And again, you could do a lot of that extrapolation. Thank you. We got to fix that, right? We got to fix that, the social determinants of health. I'm pleased to see what many of you are doing, but I'm pointing particularly to Randy McShepard with what he's doing with the SDOH work right now, and looking forward to joining you further on that. But the health of our people and the health of our communities is something we can level the playing field on. Even the fiscal health of our communities. You know, I look at my the wonderful, rich in history, rich in character community of East Cleveland, but suffering not by its own doing, but by my opinion, the problem that started with white flight and disinvestment, you know, that happened in the city of East Cleveland, but a long, now year by year, decade by decade, downward spiral to the point where fiscal resources are very tough for that community. So the community health, in terms of fiscal, in terms of its people, in terms of the operational opportunities within the government. So a lot of work to do. On the matter of justice, I don't think I have to tell you that every aspect of justice is in this community an indicator of inequity, right? Just the proportionality of who's in the central jail tonight, why they're there, where they came from. Every aspect of it, to me, speaks to an unjust system. And that's not a knock necessarily on anybody working in that system. It's just that we have a lot of work to do if we open our hearts and minds to it. And then on the economy, you know, the disparity even right here in this building, and again, I'm not knocking anybody that came before, but our outcomes relative to things as simple as contracting. When you have a community, particularly in the African-American community, where 30% of your community is a community of color and 1% of the contracts are going, you know, that delta is just too huge to not immediately address. So I wanted to kind of pivot a little bit on the first 90 days with the qualifier that there's so much work to be done, the enormity of it, but we need you, all of us. I have listened on the campaign about things that people needed. I heard over and over again that housing was an issue in this community, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's seniors being able to stay in their housing, whether it's the fact that it may not be able to fix up my house in this community, and particularly people on fixed income or low income. So one thing I want to just say out the outset, Eddie asked me to just talk a little bit about our staffing. We started a separate department of housing, specifically dedicated and fully focused on housing. Right now, it's a department of one. It's Sarah Parks Jackson, who frankly, sometimes she's got the muscle to be a department of 10 by herself, if you know her, but she's gonna need some people with her. But we got it stood up, as the new phrase goes. We stood up the Department of Housing. We did the same with transportation. It was said to me that, first of all, 12% of driver-eligible persons in Cuyahoga County don't drive, most likely because there's not an automobile in the house. But you go to the city of Cleveland, and that's over 20%. So we started a transportation department. It's right now a person, Annie Pease, who will be putting that department together. But the idea is to not supplant the RTA. The idea is to help with those areas where we have gaps in transportation. So those are two areas of work that we've worked most recently on. I'm paying close attention to our Department of Economic Development. I'm paying close attention to our Department of Workforce Development. I want to work with you guys about making sure that we're getting it right. I think we do very well on deal development and transactions. I just talked to a mayor in Oakwood about, just walking in here, about a new employer there. Will be substantial tax revenues to the city. But I want to make sure, again, that what we're doing has a focus on MBE, FBE development, and that we are focused on small business, which is really the nucleus of the network of our economy here. But I want to work with you on how do we develop an equitable outcome on our economic development initiatives. So those are some things done and things yet to do. I found that there needs to be some significant improvement in customer navigation. I think we've got a great team here at the county. I know Councilwoman Conwell could attest, but particularly her work with Health and Human Services. We need to help people find their way around this place. Where I came from back when there was an ombudsman that helped people move through the systems of government. But let me put that in real terms right now. We have 3 or 4 days left of the month of March, and by the end of March, if an EBT card is presented at a grocery store by, let's say, a mom who is at, let's say, Giant Eagle, and let's say has been used to over the last number of months in pandemic, a certain sum of money on her card, the time that she presents that card at the end of this month, she may receive, through no fault of her own, and maybe not even of her own knowing, that her benefits have been shut off. And that's the additive benefits that went in pandemic that were pulled away as Congress has decided to pull away, therefore creating this benefits cliff, right? So that person's gonna need some help. Where do I go? How do I get help? And I will admit to you, looking at our system, I think we need to better equip ourselves to help people who are in serious trauma right now. And I don't actually think we are where we need to be. And I'm worried about it because this is the end of that cycle at the end of this month. Actually, it started at the end of February, but fully the benefits that were received as supplemental, as particularly in SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Program, we are going to see a benefits cliff dive. So we've got people that have real needs, and I'd say maybe upwards of a third of our county of 1.2 million people, some 400,000 people, some way, somehow, work in the context of our government, receive some sort of benefit through the government, whether we're passing through state or federal or county program dollars. But we need to be a better navigator and make sure we get people what they need. Finally, I want to say, looking at and having conversations with Eddie and Nala about what you guys are doing, I really want to listen to where you want to take this and just be wind in your sails. But my instincts always are, with something as large as the challenge at hand, can we get to doing a few things well and priority focus on some things in the system? For my part, and I'm only one person in this group, I would say, going back to that issue of health, are our children ready to learn? Are we presenting work opportunities by the time they're work eligible and ready? And that means as teenagers. Are kids aging out of foster care still feeling that they've got a community and family, and are they getting prepped and ready? So those are 3 things I mentioned: early childhood education, work opportunities for those that are work ready, i.e. as they enter into their late teens. Our foster kids aging into a community that helps stabilize their lives. Is our justice system just? And I wanted to mention very specifically something that I give Nayla a lot of credit for because she's been helping the bail project on bail reform. But can we keep people out of the jail that don't need to be there? And can we get them out when they get there expeditiously? Because such a high proportion of people are in a pretrial arrangement that don't need to be there tonight. I wanted to say, on our job training, are we training upcoming workers and incumbent workers for today and tomorrow's jobs? Can we think about job training centers here in this region, particularly where there are gaps? Is there a Polaris on the Near East Side? And Polaris is on the southwest side of suburbs. But I'm saying this because I talked to 2 congressional reps in the last 2 weeks that would like to help us invest in job training development. And then finally, making sure that our seniors, and particularly in communities of higher proportions of African-American communities, can we make sure that our seniors can stay and that they're well and that they're taken care of and that their housing is suitable and that they are not priced out of their own market? So I said a lot, but that has a lot to me to do with the trajectory of health outcomes. Are our kids education ready? Are we work ready? Is our justice system truly just? And how are we taking care of our seniors and a few other things in between? Those would be, to me, a few things that I'd like to work on with you to see a more equitable place. I also want to say to you that the government has to lead by example, and county government should lead by example. That we should be focused on our economic development outcomes. We should be focused on our contracting outcomes. We should be focused on making sure that we're working with our justice system partners on a more just system. And I can go into greater detail on any one of those, but things I've seen some things that have to change. So, Mr. Chair, I know that was long,
No,
but thank
that
you
was
for the
perfect.
indulgence.
Thank you, County Executive
I
Romaine.
appreciate you.
I wanted to get those comments out of the gate to begin with. We have a bit more business that we're going to back up to in just a moment. So you have questions. I know that you have questions. We will get to those. And I would also say we're going to just go around. I know the County Executive knows just about all of you, varying levels of history. But we're going to introduce ourselves once again, the committee we're on, and if you want to say more, you have 5 seconds to say that more. If you wouldn't mind, what's the reflection? What's that you've come up with?
I've come up with.
Well, it's always exceptional that you come up with this time.
If we may, we're going to just backtrack and do our moment of silence and reflection. Each day, whether through television or social media, we learn of unprecedented, unimaginable, and devastating events at the national, local, and sometimes personal levels. Violence surrounds us, murders in our schools, in shopping centers, and in the places of worship for Christians, Jews, and Muslims. With each incident, we are reminded of the inequity of opportunity in all aspects of life. Too many African Americans and others live in substandard housing conditions. Basic health care is inequitable, and government seems to perpetuate these conditions. Books are being removed from school library shelves, classroom teachers are unable to teach facts, and women have no control over their bodies. Racism, sexism, paternalism, and other isms exist overtly and in subtle, new, and sophisticated ways that can go unnoticed. But these words and beliefs are ever present, lending to distrust by some and hopelessness by others. We are living in a time of failed opportunities, broken promises, and commitments offered by those in positions of decision-making power. The words equity, diversity, and inclusion seem to have become a slogan worn on a badge or a t-shirt. Ava DuVernay said, and I quote, "When we are talking about diversity, it is not to be a box that is checked," close quote. Too many live in the pain and strain of both personal, professional, and institutional racism each day. These experiences are real, creating feelings of hopelessness, fear, and anxiety. But despite the unfulfilled promises made at every level, we cannot, quote, lean back. The experiences, strengths, and promises of all of our ancestors say we can and we must face these challenges with purposefulness, courage, and determination. We must renew our purpose and let our commitments, our deeds, and our actions speak for who we are and what we truly believe. This is the work of CACE. This is all of our work. This is our collective and individual responsibility. Alice Walker said, and I quote, "In the most common way, people give up power by thinking they don't have any. CACE cannot and will not rest. We have power. Let's pause and reflect and not let anything or anyone deter our work.
Thank you, Clerk Byrd. Appreciate those words, powerful words, certainly. So if you wouldn't mind, I don't believe we have any public comments.
I don't believe we do unless there's any in the audience not. We know you guys are here for our agenda, so no one has signed in and nothing received thus far.
Okay, great.
Do you want me to introduce myself?
No, you're
Okay.
Motion. Just an introduction. Yeah, start with
County Executive Marsha Maccabee, President and CEO of the Urban League of Greater Cleveland. Just another quick point. I'm co-chairing the Racism is a Public Health Crisis work with the City of Cleveland, along with Helen Forbes Fields, and would be happy to share with you about that when you're ready.
Thanks, Marsha.
Ken Chalker, I'm the retired pastor of the University Circle United Methodist Church, and I'm on the Justice Subcommittee, and the 3 other members that were appointed with me all resigned.
Oh, no.
So I hope it wasn't anything I said. But it's a privilege to be on this group and to have been involved as I have with that Justice Subgroup, and anxious to get restarted on some of the efforts that we have made.
Glenn Chumate, work for Construction Employers Association, but do a lot of work with youth and minority businesses. I'm on the Communications Committee.
Good to see you, Mr. Executive. Randy McShepard, RPM International Incorporated. As you know, I also am the chairman and co-founder of Policy Bridge, Black think tank in Cleveland, celebrating our 19th year, and the Red Urban Farm. I chair the Equitable Quality of Life Subcommittee that has 4 areas of focus. And I just wanted to mention quickly that 2 of those areas are housing and transportation. So there's already been new departments created, so I feel like, hey, you're off to a great start.
Great minds think alike.
Good afternoon, County Executive. Mayor Blackwell from the City of Maple Heights. I actually came in filling the term that was left vacant by Cordell Stokes. Is it Cordell? Yes, Cordell, not Cordell. So I really don't remember what committee that I'm on. I just do the work. Very pleased to be here. This is important, certainly being an elected official, to hear what the issues are in communities like Maple Heights, low to moderate income. So the information I'm able to gather here helps me in my leadership. So very pleased to be here, very honored. And thank you for the reappointment. I appreciate it.
Good afternoon. Habiba Grimes. I'm the CEO at Positive Education Program. We're best known as PEP, as you know. I sit on the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee and bring an education perspective to that committee's work. And I chair the Communications Subcommittee, and our focus is creating pathways for community members to engage with this work, inform the work, and I'm really grateful for Levine Ross.
Eddie Taylor. Taylor Oswald is my company, and I've been privileged to serve as chair of CACE since its beginning.
I'm Heidi Gullett. I'm a family and public health physician here in the community and chair the Health and Healthcare Subcommittee. And in my role at CACE, we've done a lot of work, in large part with this group, focused on system mapping around structural racism and how there's a lot of intersectionality and where are the leverage points that we as a committee can really focus on. With limited resources, where do we go? And so using community voice, lived experience of racism to really understand the system and how we leverage some of those systems impacts. So I think it resonates a lot with what you shared.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, County Executive Stephen Cavanis. I'm with Team NEO, Director of Project Management. I know that we work closely with the staff on different project things. I also chair the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee. Obviously, it was pleasing to me to hear that you are focused on economic and workforce development, and really looking forward to working with you and your staff and getting to understand priorities within those departments. Also, one of the things that I've tried to encourage in the past is we recognize that the county has certain powers over certain things. We also recognize the county has influence. And so how do we sort of tease out the influence side and drive, the efforts that
Good
we're
point.
trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go. Nice to see you again.
Yanela Sims, Ohio State Director for SBA Local 1. I'm on the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee. Looking forward to
See you.
So, Dr. Charles Milan, we've had an opportunity to
Yeah,
meet
it's
before.
nice to,
Spent the last 28 years at Cleveland Clinic. I'm now at Metro the past year and a half. I'm a surgeon. I've focused and dedicated my career essentially over the past 30 years to addressing health disparities. And commercial, we have our Minority Men's Health Fair coming up April the 27th. So proud to be on this CACE committee. Also, I'm a member of the Health Equity Committee.
I'm so glad. Thank you for the education during my trail of 18 months. It was great. We Zoomed together, right?
Yes.
Nice to see you again. It's better in person.
No
Yeah.
question about it.
You bet.
We will allow questions in just a moment, but it is important as well that we commend Naila and team for all the great work that they do on behalf of CASE on a routine basis, right? We've got lots of accomplishments we can point to, certainly more work to be done, but Naila, well, it's true, right? I don't know, want to call it unending, but there's certainly more work to be done. So if you wouldn't mind, your team, folks who support you.
I can't even begin. Thank you so much, Eddie. You guys know I used to say this was, those of you who've been here with me from the beginning, this was a second job. And I must say to my friend, my former colleague, and my Laura Black, who I know is listening. We all remember Laura, and she is now with Dr. Steed at Metro, and we wish her all the best, and her and I are still in communication, and I 100% guarantee that she's watching this live stream. So Laura, thank you again publicly for all the help and assistance you've given me. Also, I have to thank my clerk team, Monica Berry, who in her day job is the manager of my civil department, who also, I believe, did some work when she was in graduate school with our executive at ECI. But Monica Berry does a lot of the getting us ready for these meetings. And those of you who have ever spoken to me, I look at Habiba because you know who I'm going to mention now, would be Latia Adams, who works with me. Latia has been a friend and a colleague of mine since Ed Fitzgerald asked me to start the Office of Inspector General. Councilwoman Conwell, you know her well as well, and I could not do all of this without her. I know she sometimes bothers you all asking for meeting dates and other things to keep us on track. But really everyone, I've been fortunate enough to serve as clerk for the last 8 years, and as Councilwoman Conwell, I hope she will agree, have a great team that I work with, and all of who are committed to this work and ready to help and lend a hand whenever need be. So thank you, and thank you, Chris, for allowing me, or Executive Ronaine for allowing me this opportunity to continue with this work that I so strongly, personally and professionally believe in. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And since I've disrespected the agenda so much, we'll do it one more time. Yes, I'm sorry.
Sorry, just a community member. I will have a request to the chair. I know I missed the so-called public comment section, but since right now we have lost lots of valuable members, so I assume it's possible you probably will open up the door to invite more people to be in. But one thing I have noticed from the beginning for this particular council to form, lots of you are distinguished members in the community, true, but you are mostly a head of an organization. And I think to have the true equity, we probably need the people who are on the entry level in the organization, or the people, really ordinary people, for example, myself, to participate. In that case, not only we can hear the people already on top knowing things, we can also check on what's in reality throughout the time, from what's truly happening on the ground. That's my little suggestion. Thank you.
Noah?
I second that 150%. Chris, I know that I've mentioned this to you before, that in order for us to speak from a space of, returning citizens, or talking about students, or talking about homeless folks, those folks that have had that experience need to be in the room. So I'm stating it publicly that I 100% support us filling some of these seats with citizens that come from those spaces so that we can get their full perspective and we can actually speak to their experiences and use our positions or roles in our organizations or in the community to do the work that we are intended to do.
Thank you, Ms. Sims. And thank you, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Miss
ma'am.
Lou.
Lou, look, that couldn't be a more relevant comment. I appreciate it. It's not as if it was an oversight. Sometimes we get moving and folks are assigned and you allow that momentum, that inertia there to sort of carry forward. But I think it is important that we take a step back and be mindful just of what you said. So thank you for those comments. Ms. Maccabee, you were gonna.
It was just amen.
And I
I'm
was
sorry.
just gonna say on that point, I think when the organization got developed or the board, it wasn't necessarily to be from the top down. It was looked at because these individuals are over large institutions, that they can get that message down. That's how I looked at it. But I'm very believe in the inclusiveness of others that are actually experiencing it. But I don't want you to feel that it was slighted and how the process was thought. But she's over 1,000
Every bit of this is
people.
an evolution, right?
Yeah.
And that's what
So.
we're all about at this point. So I agree, Councilwoman Conwell, because we are evolving as we go. Yes, Dr. Modlin.
I would just say real quick, some people are going to need a letter from county executive or the chair to be able to participate, to give to their supervisors at work, to have time to sit on a committee like this that, that shouldn't be overlooked. Not everybody has the ability to, get off and work and take time to participate.
But you're right, but we can't make difficult, right, the only barrier that we see. So I'm with you completely. As I was saying, I'd like to ask for approval of the minutes from our last meeting, if you wouldn't mind. Can I get a motion to approve those meeting minutes?
Second.
Any questions, comments? Those in favor? Aye. Okay, I will take a step back. Any questions of the county executive? Given what you've heard, things you'd like to put on the agenda?
I would just say, would you put or consider homelessness as on your agenda as well?
Yes, I think it's at the crossroads of the health of our citizens and our communities. Actually, Lou and I spent a little time last week at her request over at the women's shelter, Norma Hare.
Yeah.
And then we spent some time at NEOC together and had conversations all the way through. But yeah, I very much feel, and I want to thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Mudlin, if I may. The county, as you may have already heard, we've just launched a new strategic plan vision on homelessness, and our goals include the effort over the next 5 years to reduce our unhoused population by 25%, which is it's a goal. It's a I would say a bold goal, but I stand behind the Office of Homeless Services on that. We're going to need to work with the City of Cleveland quite a bit. One of the reasons I was at NEOC was just trying to continue to work with the organization on those that are without shelter, so the unsheltered homeless population. On any given night, depending on the season, there's 200 to 300, brothers and sisters in our community that are on the streets. Some communities have made great progress on zeroing that out, and I'd like to. And then I think the big thing is, what are we doing to help people with the tools they need to be in permanent support housing and in permanent work opportunities if they're work eligible. So, yeah, thanks for bringing it up. Very much agree.
I would just like to add, under the Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, certainly as an elected official sitting here, when we talk about economic development, the opportunities, I think it must include the viability and the retaining the revenue that cities need to have, be able to really make these services available. It affects quality of life. It affects their criminal justice. It helps health, it affects health and healthcare. It's how I keep my senior center open. It's how I recruit officers that are committed to justice. It's how I choose my law director, my prosecutor. But we are challenged by what's happening in Columbus. And so we have to look at revenue replacement. We've got 59 cities, and there is some competition, which is healthy, but certainly when we see what's happening in the Columbus areas, and we're attacked with reducing the assessed value for property tax, which is our biggest source of income, it affects my school report card. We talk about workforce development, but if we're gonna take money out of our school system, how do they compete? That is an equity and that is a justice issue. So we have to look at these things in a way that, in addition to the social issues, there's a business model that I hope that I can take from this membership, this participation, to understand how we're gonna run this huge business. Our cities are small businesses, just like we focus a lot on the businesses that make widgets and those, but we must remember the cities are businesses. I have payroll, right? I have businesses, I have contractors that have to be paid, but our revenue is continually being eroded by what's happening in Columbus. And so when we apply as leaders for these competitive grants, and we have been very fortunate in what Maple Heights has been able to bring back in dollars for infrastructure. And Humes, I have a food pantry, I have a food giveaway, but we have to continue that work continues in our Economic Opportunity Subcommittee, and I think you're chair of that, right?
Yes.
So we've got to
No, I'm
continue.
sorry, that's.
No. You are.
I'm quality of life.
Quality of life.
Economic
These two
development.
make- But that is the quality of life that I'm able to take. So I make this commitment. We were talking about this being a manic Monday, but I got off the elevator because it has felt like a manic Monday. But that's what I need from these two committees, to really take a look at how I can be a successful city. But I don't think people look at economic development in terms of the city being a business that provides the same services in terms of a quality of life, a wage, a retirement, benefits, and we have some of the best benefits. And I hope that is incorporated as we look at business. I think it's important that you look at the city as the business that it is. I think that gets overlooked.
Yeah, and again, I don't mean to respond to every single question, but I did want to say, channeling Mayor Blackwell, first of all, I know you don't want me to say this because I say this all the time, but she's done an incredible job, and I'll call it a turnaround, fiscal turnaround in your own community, but you need continued resources. You're absolutely right. I mean, because I travel to, I think, 57 mayors in 59 communities, we hear this over and over. I'm reminded of in the city of Brook Park, they had an outdoor-indoor pool in centralized campus, but they can't keep their indoor pool open because of spalling concrete on the roof. And the mayor says, therefore my seniors can't swim, which is part of their therapy and their rehabilitation. And so that's why I always say citizen health and health of communities, because they're interlinked in terms of what you can provide. Two quick things on, I don't know if we do policy, briefs or advocacy of any kind, but House Bill 1, I've testified against. I'm sure the mayor's familiar with it, but for all of you, this is a proposal by some members of House of Representatives here in the state of Ohio. House Bill 1 is proposing a flat tax, which always, on the real high level gets people at hello, but then when you get to the depths of what it really means, you lose people. And where they're losing us is the deleterious effect it will have on some of our fixed income seniors. It will have a deleterious effect on our schools, our libraries, just the services.
Don't forget the parks.
And the parks, So we are opposing House Bill 1 because somewhere all those revenues will have to be made back up if it wasn't already difficult enough. My take is, while I want a good state partnership, they've got to understand and recognize local community needs. Governor DeWine did propose a modest increase in local government funding, but when I say we, I've joined the County Commissioners Association of Ohio, even though we're a statistical anomaly to the county commissioner system, but I've joined them in advocacy to bring that LGF percentage higher, because we lost a lot several years ago during the CACE administration, which directly came out of your pocket. So HB 1, if you do a little more homework, you might find it's not something we want to support. And local government funding, if we can bring it up at the state level, goes a long way toward replenishing some of those deficits at our communities.
If I may just add, there are a couple cities in fiscal emergency. You referenced one, we were a city in fiscal emergency. If we're not looking and supporting us as businesses, you're gonna have cities go back, always on the brink of fiscal emergency, and you have failed an entire population. In terms of numbers in Maple Heights, you have failed 25,000 people. So it is really, really important that we look at cities for the businesses that they are. I just wanna make sure that that gets kind of added in our discussion.
So, County Executive, when the charter for CACE was first implemented, the focus was really on internal policies and practices for the county. So is it your intent to continue that focus on internal policies and practices as the first question? And is there any consideration for then beginning to look outside to external systems that interact with the county? And priority-wise, how are you thinking about that?
I'm glad you asked that, Marcia. And, Mr. Chair, I will say, again, it's the will of the body here with what you want to do, but I will say yes to number one, but yes to number two. I think, we cannot, and Glenn, again, I think I go to you because I think you've been the conscience for me on some things, and we're not always as good as we should be, and I own that, and I will continue to own that. So I think at the county, we need to continue to up our game on things like contracting and, again, notwithstanding the good efforts of some of our team to try to get us there, we're just not there yet. But I think we'd be remiss if we didn't use the strength of this group to look at outside opportunities where we can move the needle, like you're saying, out in communities, Mayor. So yes and yes.
County Executive, I just wanted to say, you may recall that I'm a past chair of the Workforce Investment Board. Under my watch, we merged the city and the county workforce boards. And when you talked about the idea of Polaris centers on the east side, the one strong piece of advice I would offer is please talk to employers.
Yeah.
If there has been a flaw with the public workforce system, I think it has been too many city county employees and too many nonprofits telling employers what they need versus employers having a chance to even weigh in with their perspectives. And just by example, the company I work for, RPM, we own a company in Beechwood called Trimco, which has a program called the RISE program, which is training inmates their last 6 months in prison and placing them into full-time 18-an-hour positions doing roofing work when they are released. And this is changing lives in a major way, but those kinds of things you probably wouldn't even know about, right? So it's important that employers, get in front of these kinds of issues and share their perspectives and their ideas and their innovations with, the city and county and other levels of government.
I couldn't agree more. And I like this dialogue. We're having Q&A turned into the way it should be. I guess three quick observations. One is coming out of the experience we had with the Workforce Reconciliation Act, and that's when you and I first met. I think, Randy, you were starting to chair the WIB board back that far back. I asked the county commissioners then if they would support an employer resources division of economic development, and we did. They did support it. It's subsequently, I have to check with Director Herdeg, but it appears to have gone away. I think that point about listening to what the employer, where are the trends going, where are the training needs going. We do have our deputy director is doing a good job of getting skill ready, skill up monies out, but I think we have to listen more, and that's why I proposed that division back when and actually managed it for the commissioners. The second thing is when I do cavalierly say where are the Polaris's opportunities, I don't want to be too cavalier about it, but it strikes me, knowing the city a little bit, that we could probably do a little better on placements, particularly in some of our eastern communities. I just think of that.
Exactly right.
So I want to work with you on where those would be. But the last observation I want to make is I appreciate what Trumco and RPM are doing, because there are so many examples of employers that are out there just quietly doing all the right things. I remember being in the St. Clair neighborhood over the campaign trail and meeting a guy who said, I keep one of my departments particularly for reentries. That's what I did. And he said, but for God, this is where I would be. And it was just an epiphany to me that this is a guy who's given back. And he said to me, we walked into a room of the gentlemen that were working on the floor, the shop floor, and he said, they keep getting hassled about the bracelet monitors, that they have to go back and check in. And he says it's during the work hours, so they have to leave their jobs. And these are things we can solve for if we know and we're proximate to where the problems are. So I mean, bring them to me too. I'm gonna obviously Nayla is we work together, but I'm gonna bring as much team as we can to all these issues that we need to bring to. So bring them to us. Thank you.
So, County Executive, thanks. I want to just add to Member McShepard's comment. So, when you're engaging the employers, I mean, part of it is keeping them at the table, and I think over time, that's been part of the challenge. So, like, when you're thinking about it, how are we going to create an environment where they stay engaged? So that was the first. The second is, I would say in the previous administration, there were some good things that happened, good developments. I want to recognize Director Lockett, what she has been doing and standing up the equity department. And, I believe there was a equity zone legislation that was passed. And so one thing that I keep on hearing is that you're measuring, right? You're coming up with measurable outcomes. And so a effort like that, knowing that it's successful and keeping our eye on it and how it's actually made a difference, I think is going to be really important to say this work is meaningful and we need to continue doing it.
Yeah, and really highlight the best practices that are out
Yes.
there. Yeah. Just example that we were at Shaker Heights 2 weeks ago. I don't know if this is a direct example of this, but just in taking a best practice and looking for scale. Shaker has moved on the initiative to bring a mental health worker on an incident where appropriate with a officer. I think the goal also might be to actually create an incident management where the first responder is a mental health worker in front of the officer. But in this case, it's a co-response model you may have read about. We went out for the discussion with the chief of police, fire, the mayor, and the caseworker who came over from Recovery Resources and is now full-time with Shaker. They had 192 responses in the last 2 quarters of last year, and they believe they saved 3 lives that were attempted suicides, that were averted because of the mental health de-escalation that happened with the caseworker. Next day, Euclid calls me and says, because they saw the story that night that ran on the news, that we would like to try this out. So I guess it's the point is about models and replicating where something's working and measuring if it's working. So, yeah.
Okay, so time for 2 more questions. Mr. Shumate and Reverend Chalker.
Oh, thank you. And County Executive talked a little bit about appointments, or how do you get county policies carried through boards and commissions and other entities. And so if it's a county policy around what this committee is focused on, which is economic inclusion, how do appointments in other boards and commissions, and I'll just pick Gateway or Facilities Commission or others, how do they understand the mission or the edict, if you will, of county government? How do we have that happen? And then secondly, and I think it speaks to Mayor Blackwell's comments about, and even yours about best practices, there are probably resources which the county already has, just need to be shared with other communities. Yeah. So even around purchasing, I have a lot of conversations with smaller entities of governments about how can we do this? How can we have a inclusion policy or program, and what does state law provide or not provide? And are there best practices through what Director Lockett's doing with purchasing that just could be shared in a broader context without recreating, just sharing,
Yes.
What that opportunity really looks like? So those would be my, 2 thoughts for opportunity to advance.
Both great, and I will, I think continuing to sort of showcase some of the better practices that are out there, or just things people may not know in terms of contracting, purchasing, and other. And your point about the boards is a great one. One of the things I'm trying to do is get just information about each board known to the public and make sure that application process remains transparent and open. It's interesting, probably a dangerous example, but I recently made an appointment to a board by somebody who just applied. I didn't know them, I interviewed them, liked them, and there was a couple of groups that came at us. I guess I'm not gonna reveal who the organization did, reveal these groups, but they came out and said, well, they're not one of ours, you know, and I said, well, we're trying to open this up, right, you know? So I'm proud to have done that, sure, yeah.
Can I speak to the, number one, remember I've always opened up and offered the legislative committees. So what the individual subcommittees are working on, I'm sure the chairs of the council committees would love to hear a presentation of where you're at, where you're looking to go. It's not just about us passing contracts. Most of us are really open to hearing what the work, I mean, we passed it as a body, what the individual subcommittees are doing. You know, I've always opened that up for Health and Human Services.
Thank you.
Councilwoman, would that be,
Economic would be Jack.
oh,
Shauna.
not Scott? Okay, Jack.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, one final question, then we'll move to the CBC conversation, Reverend Chalmers.
Just a comment, this is not a criticism, and I've made the comment in a number of places, and certainly talked to Yvonne Conwell about it briefly, about this group, since its inception, has filed some very significant, I think, reports, some of them suitable for framing, that with recommendations and possibilities, and it's all been really good stuff, but one of the things that would be very helpful is to see what happens to those recommendations. What, do any of them have any possibilities for gaining legs and affecting any kind of systemic change? I think and that's a matter of just inner communications in what we do. But I think that would be helpful because we've done, I think, some creative thinking about these things and don't want to just keep reinventing the wheel.
Suitable for framing, we got it. I like it. Ms. Williams.
It's me. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
And thank you so much for having us here this afternoon and allowing us to present the project that we are about to embark on. My name is Shalina Williams, and I am the Community Engagement and Project Manager for the Cleveland Police Commission. I am also the project manager for this project entitled The Conversation, the Impact of Police Violence on the Mental Health of the Black Community. This project is a community collaborative initiative. And so with me today, I do have members of our Executive Planning Committee, and I want them to introduce themselves so that they can tell you why they are part of this very important project. And so if we could start with LaTanya.
Hi, everyone. My name is LaTanya Goldsby, President and co-founder of Black Lives Matter Cleveland. I'm coming into this work as a family member who is directly impacted by police violence. My cousin's 12-year-old Tamir Rice, who was murdered by Cleveland police in 2014. It's imperative that this conversation is had as we talk about racism as a public health issue. Policing of Black bodies is also a public health issue, and it should also be recognized. This is why we stand in collaboration and in partnership with the partners that are supporting this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Rabbi Golston.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and to the county executive. My name is Ben Golston. I'm pastor of Heritage Community Baptist Church. Last 22 years, I've served on the Adams Board of Cuyahoga County, and most recently as his board chair. Also the co-founder and past chair and present member of the Hunger Network of Greater Cleveland. Also the proud host of a radio show, Black Thought, Everything Must Change, on WOBU 95.9 FM, every Tuesday at 1 p.m. The last 460 years, our community has suffered from the trauma of racism and the trauma of slavery, and has been even intensified by the trauma that has been created because of the relationship between the police department and the African American community. That trauma was created first by police slave chasers, which was the inception of the police department in many parts of our country, along with the fact of the Casual Killing Act of 1669, where it stated that any white person who had to punish or correct any slave, even unto death, no harm, malice, or charges would be brought against them. Coupled with the fact that March of 2021, 66% of the citizens of Cleveland are functionally illiterate. And in some communities, 95% of the citizens of Cleveland are functionally illiterate. When you take these tensions and the trauma that's between people of our community and other communities and the police department, it increases the possibility of brutality by the police, and it increases the possibility of behavioral health problems, both in mental health and chemical abuse disorders. And so with that in mind, the Adams Board has joined the Cleveland Police Commission and moving towards gathering data and providing therapy for people who have found themselves needing the necessary treatment. We have set aside a pool funding tool so that anybody who is identified out of the conversations can get ongoing therapy for the next year.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Latoya Logan.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to come and speak to you today about this topic of the conversation, which actually began last week. I am a social worker and a trauma therapist, and I work primarily with Black males who are 14 and older who have had some experience or exposure to risk factors that could contribute to trauma, chronic and toxic stress, increased risk of suicidality, and unfortunately, incarceration. When we talk about trauma, we're very limited. We say, you must have had some terrible thing that happened that we can pinpoint. But trauma is poverty. Trauma is being exposed to environments where buildings are dilapidated and you look around and there isn't even a grocery store in your community. Trauma is going to school and having teachers call you aggressive when in reality you are dysregulated because your household is unsafe and your community is unsafe. I am a person, unfortunately, who has experienced chronic trauma at every level from systems that were there to support me, in addition to every single member of my immediate family. And when we sought out services were not available because my brothers, my eldest who was murdered in Cleveland, and all others who went through the criminal justice system were just called aggressive and violent and hostile. And my favorite, just completely treatment resistant. One of the reasons I started my organization was to deal with the gap in understanding, in resources, and truly community, and serving those who are most likely to experience arrest, have some interaction with policing, and unfortunately, whatever we say, we redeem souls, but we don't redeem lives, because once you get that record, it is forever. And that doesn't just impact you, but it impacts your family, your children, and your community. The reason this event is so important is that this has been an ongoing issue that we continue to look at and overlook because we focus on business development and wealth. And while I do believe that money is important, because if you have money, you definitely will live longer and you will live better because you can access resources. But money does not resolve systemic issues built into the very fabric of our communities. When we talk about policing, I've been on both sides of it. My eldest brother who was murdered here in Cleveland, police went all the way down to Florida to find the witnesses to solve his murder. And I'm thankful. And I've been on the other side where police I've witnessed as a 12-year-old child beat my 14-year-old brother. So we can't ever take this as pro-police, because that's nonsense. We have to be pro-community because police are members of our community. And creating a healthy relationship is contingent upon us challenging that. This event is not just about identifying what trauma is and what it looks like and what the symptoms are. This event is purposed to provide individuals who cannot name their experience with the language and understanding to do so that we can effectively get them engaged in services, so hopefully we prevent all the consequences and obstacles that they will face without that treatment. Part of what we're doing on the mental health side for this event is having several workshops that will focus on trauma in the body, trauma and reconnection, trauma related to opioid and substance use abuse, trauma related to poor maladaptive behaviors, and of course, trauma, just what is it in general? At each of those workshops, individuals will be provided with information about trauma, and then we will ask them, what do they think they needed to address this? What do they need at this point in their life to build stability? We are taping each of these 20-minute sessions, the initial part for the video to be placed on the website so that if you can't attend the event, you still can get that information. This is something that I do at my organization, Project Lift. We do tip cards. And at every single workshop, a tip card will be created. Tip cards are basically an overview of information related to mental wellness, and it gives them strategies and resources to pursue once they walk out of the workshop. This isn't a training. This is a healing project because we want people to come and connect in, and we want them to walk out knowing who to call if they find themselves in distress. 60% of homicides in the city of Cleveland are youth under the age of 17 who are Black. Cuyahoga County remains the #1 committing county to the Ohio Department of Youth Services, and 80% of those individuals are Black males. 48% of the Ohio State prison population are Black males, while only representing less than 13% when you factor in all Black people represent 13% in this state. When we're looking at homelessness and suicidality, if you've not noticed, in Black girls and boys, it is at astronomical rates. This isn't just because they're angry. It's because they don't know what to do with what they're experiencing, so anger is what they give out. And if we as a community can't do better at assessing that and training each other up so that we have other options besides arrest, besides confinement, besides putting someone in child welfare services because the father may have done X, Y, and Z, we can do better. And that's why I'm a part of this project, to make sure that we do. Thank you.
All right.
And finally, I would like for our commissioner, she is one of our newly appointed commissioners, Commissioner Jan Ridgway, to come forth. She has championed this cause the moment she stepped into office.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Okay, so I'm Jan Ridgway, and I don't think there is a topic that was discussed around this table today that I have not had the opportunity to deal with. I have had the opportunity to meet most of you or come in contact with most of your organizations. I volunteered in Garden Valley for 12 years. Shepherd, yes.
Okay, good to see you.
Maccabee, yes. Live down the street, yes. There's so many of you that I've had the opportunity to work with. And I appreciate the comment that was made about community being at the table. You know, what we tried to do in Garden Valley was to teach our community how to use their own voices so that organizations didn't have to speak for them. And I think that's what's important for me, even on the commission. Very new member, 3 months, learning this job, lots of hours, lots of reading, but I was a reluctant applicant for this commission. It was the Garden Valley community that encouraged me to put my application in because we had so many young people that was confronting the police in violent ways that they felt that they had no voice at all. And they asked if I would put an application in to learn to speak for them and in turn to use our community to work with the police to change a dynamic that was happening not only in the city of Cleveland, but across the county. I've watched what has happened in Bedford. I've watched what has happened in Maple Heights. I have watched what has happened even in Beechwood. And so we know that violence is not limited to a zip code. We know that the zip code would not determine who our children and our families can become. And so often, that's how we do it. If you came out of Garden Valley, you always have your hand out. But we learned that people in Garden Valley gave a hand up because we were all volunteer agency. And the thing that is so important is not just about police violence, it's about community violence. It's about when we see our young people shooting each other because they haven't dealt with the trauma that they have encountered as they have grown up. And when they come in contact with the police, it's usually a violent confrontation because they're still carrying that trauma and they act out with whoever is challenging them. And so we need to deal with trauma. I was first put in a police car when I was in 10th grade because I tried to integrate the public library at home. The second time was when I was in 11th grade when we sat at a soda fountain in Georgia. The second time, they fired my mother and father, and they had to go and work 300 miles from where I lived. I could have said I'm anti-police, but I believe very truly that we can reform police in the city of Cleveland. But we also must start with helping each other deal with the trauma that we have encountered as we have grown up. And we have to give our people the language to use to identify their own trauma. If someone had told me 20 years ago that I had been traumatized, I would have said no. Because some of us have learned how to live with our trauma. Some of us have learned how to even thrive with our trauma. It doesn't mean that it's good, but that's what we have learned. And what's important about this series of workshops is that our people in Cleveland area and in Cuyahoga County are so transient. Our young people could live in Garden Valley this month, and the next month they're in Maple Heights living with auntie. Or the next month they're over in Euclid, living with their sister or their grandma. And so our young people are constantly moving around in our community, and we need to reach them wherever they are. We need to reach our families wherever they are. The headlines today, or sub-headlines today in USA News, said that more of our young people are being killed at home than they are in a classroom. Can you imagine that? Close range by relatives. That's trauma. That's trauma. So what we're doing today is coming and asking for support to be able to complete the 4 workshops that we have set up. We just completed the women's workshop, and it was amazing to listen to women, young, old, college age, teenagers, share their experiences once they recognize what trauma was. The next one will be for men only. Give you a chance for your space to be able to share openly. The third one will be with youth. And the fourth one would be a community conversation with all of us coming together. And at every step of the way, we have professionals who are there being able to answer questions and to provide resources to help us deal with what's going on in our community. Cleveland is almost every year, we're the second or the first most, the city with the most poverty in the country. And there's no way that we can be that and Maple Heights isn't that.
Absolutely.
There's no way that we can be that and Euclid isn't that. It's a collective thing, and that's how people see us. They don't see Maple Heights different from Cleveland. It's all Cleveland. And so we need your support to be able to complete these workshops, and we would love to have you attend some of them, to see how you too can learn from these experiences and how you can offer further help through your organizations and also by working with the communities and the clients you work with. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. And so, yes, this is the reason that we're here. The conversation is a series of community conversations. We have just had our first launch conversation last Thursday. That was the women's conversation. Our next conversation, as Commissioner Woodroy just said, it is April 29th. It will be for the men only. These are just a few of our community partners. The Alphas, Cleveland chapter, and I can't pronounce it, Delta Lambda something.
Delta Alpha Lambda.
Delta Alpha. Delta Alpha Lambda. They have partnered with us. They're going to share their space. They're going to share some of their brothers who will present and be keynote speakers for that event. Tri-C has partnered with us for our youth conversation, May 20th. Our keynote speaker at that event will be Walter Patton. Some of you may know his work. He is the creator of Ghetto Therapy. I just had a conversation with a young lady who attended our women's conversation. I want to say this right, please don't kill me if I'm not saying this the right way. I believe she identifies as non-binary, okay? Non-binary. And she said, I would love to see a fifth conversation added for just the LGBTQ and trans community. I said, done, 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 and done. So we are going to talk. You guys didn't know that. I'm letting you know that. You know, it just happened this morning. So I'm going to talk with our executive committee, but I believe that they will be supportive of a fifth conversation in June for our LGBT and trans community. That is also Pride Month. And then the final conversation will happen in July. That is a collective, community-wide conversation. It is not particular to just Cleveland. Anyone can attend these conversations. And so, as Commissioner Ridgway and everyone here today has said, we do need your support to make this a reality. There are so many of us walking around with what is considered stuck trauma that we are unaware that we even have, right? Because we've normalized it in such a way. So we want to make people aware. You have been traumatized, we all have. But there is something that we can do about it. We have partnered with some of the most phenomenal therapists in the city, in the county. As you heard, Latoya Logan, owner of Project Lift. We have Serenity Health and Wellness. We have Emotional Wellness Centers of Ohio. Eric King is and I heard he's some kind of therapy god. You can't even get on his wait list. But he's partnered with us. And all of them, for 1 year, have committed to providing services for our community. And the Adams Board is picking up the tab. You just can't get any better than that. And they've even said, we've slotted X amount of slots for people to receive these therapies. But if there's a need, and there is a need for more, they will open it up to more. In our first conversation alone, 10 people signed up. Ms. Billy Gilliam, she is the Director of Clinical Services for the YWCA, another one of our partners. After her presentation, 10 people signed up right away. 3 more people over the weekend called me, how can I get to see her? So if there is a need, there is a need, there is a need. We're asking that you take the information back to your communities. We need your support. We need your support not only in the communities, but we also need financial support. So I hope that you will see the need, see the value in these conversations and come on board. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Thank you all. Thank you, Councilwoman Conley. I'm sorry.
Yes, and so I just wanted to say to everybody, this is why I invited Ms. Williams and the commissioners to present for 3 things. Connection of the related work with this board and what we do. So individually, I can just see some of the leaders that they could connect with. A connection to separate works each of your organizations may lead in your private lives, and resource connections to make this a reality. The Adams Board did step up to participate in this, and this is what this I thought it was the perfect, and I might bring other people here in the future, but this was, we're all out there doing our day-to-day work, and we come in connections with individuals or great things. And many of the things that Executive Ronayne spoke about today, this is about access, disparities, equity. This is just one portion, so I can see the health or a quality of life that would really relate to this. And to Marsha Maccabee's point earlier, I thought it was, when we started this, it was going to be more internal. We were really looking at the county internal racial equities. But then I was told that no, we have that already, and this group, this body would look more externally. And how do we? So individuals like this that come in, they're needed. They're needed to share, make connections and cards. I think the one, just me, I'm a community person, so I'm grassroots, and I might be here today and in my jeans tomorrow somewhere else. But just on the point of when they're having their next, he's having a men's health. Get your information to him. So, it might not all the time be monetary, but there are many things that we can do as individuals to circulate this information that will undoubtedly help us all, because we're, as a previous predecessor, we're one community, right? So her individuals that might be hungry is surely going to impact somebody in the neighboring community. So if we think like that as a mindset, we can work together. So hopefully you'll be trading some cards with Ms. Williams and her group for later. Thank you very much.
Councilwoman, and to the chair, my executive director, Jason Bergman, from CPC. He is our phenomenal leader. He has, again, championed this cause as well, supported every step of the way of it. Jason, please say something.
I'm just here to support Shelley, but I will say, this is the reason that I was so in love with the idea of this project is I've been in this capacity one way or another since 2017. And one of the things that I couldn't stand about the way we got pushback was every time something would happen in the community, the issue of the effects of that on the community was often ignored. Or we would have people who wear the badge say, well, I live in the community, my friends are in the community. We don't have trauma here in Cleveland. If something happened nationally, they would say, yeah, but it's not here. They would put us in some kind of magical bubble where they would say the relationships in our specific area are better than what the national picture is. And we just know that's not true, because we have gotten out and talked to enough people. And now this project will finally give us the data to say, yes, it has happened here, it has happened for generations, and there is trauma related to policing. So we can move forward with the healing, because now we can talk about that trauma. We have the data to show that it exists, and we can work on that trauma, because we can't build that long-term police reform by just skipping over that part, which is often what we're in a hurry to do sometimes. So thank you all for listening.
And I just wanted to say, speaking of data, we are partnered with Akron University. They're doing a one-year-long research study so that we do have the data that we need to.
We'll look forward to seeing that as well. The county executive has to go. Any parting comments?
I'm a little, Ben Golston, please tell some of the folks at Adams I was here for a good reason, because that's who I'm meeting with next. But I'm a little over on their time, but I wanted to hear what you guys had to say. And to my colleague Yvonne Conwell, thank you, Councilwoman, for bringing the team, and to the commission. This is what it's about. It's learning from each other's, best practices. So thank you, all of you. I think, as Mayor Blackwell knows, we like to port between communities better practices. So learning is everything. And to Marcia's point, yes, I'm glad that it sounds like a few of you want to use some external-facing practices too, which I think we could do both internal and external. So, Mr. Chair, thank you it was a great first meeting for me. Learned a lot. Nyla and I will be working quite a bit on follow-up. Whoever made the point about implementation and what are we doing, Rev Chalker, I think you made that. What are we doing with some of the good practices that are on the shelf? Let's bring them to implementation. We'll work on it. But this was fantastic, and I look forward to working with all of you more. Thank you. Okay, see ya.
Hey, Chris, I just want to say one thing to you. You heard from Reverend Chalker, but, you're new coming in. As you start your budget cycle, what you're going to give to the council, I know that was one of the things that really needs to be addressed with this, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah, actually, I was talking about that before the meeting. We'll follow up on that. Gotta fund the initiatives, right? Yeah. Thank you, Councilwoman. And I'm gonna be at that, or wanna hear about the men's health fair. So yeah, keep the circulation of info. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say thank you all so very much.
Hey, guys, just talking to you.
I just want to say thank you all so very much for all that you're doing and for spending so much time helping us understand today. In my update in a few minutes, I'm not sure if you all have to go, but I'm going to give an update on the 2023 to 2025, so 3-year Cuyahoga County Community Health Improvement Plan. And it has everything to do with what you just talked about and is supported by our two health departments and our hospital systems, in addition to another community-based organization. So if any of you cannot stay, that's totally fine. I'll catch up with you, but I'm going to give some information that I think really resonates with what you just described.
Okay, thank Thank you.
Yeah,
Please.
I just want to thank you all for the wisdom and vision to bring a healing conversation, series of conversations to the community. I want to thank you personally. I lost my brother to police violence in Columbus, Ohio, in the midst of a severe and prolonged mental health crisis. So that intersection is impacting us as family members and loved ones, but very much in the day-to-day lives of people trying to overcome this generational, transgenerational, cultural, and historical trauma that we don't have language for, and we've been trying to tough it out. We've been told racism isn't real. We've been told that racism is in the past, and we've been gaslit to a point where we're walking around carrying tremendous distress, and our children are carrying tremendous distress, and we try to put Band-Aids on it, as my friend Yovanka Hall will say. And so I want to thank you for that vision to just bring this conversation. And my hope is that as policy is developed, we'll seek to understand the biological, neurodevelopmental, psychological, relational factors that will sometimes impede folks from going to that healthiest food choice or entering into a healthy intimate relationship. When you endure trauma for years and years and for generations, there are psychological, relational, spiritual, physical, neurodevelopmental impacts that are hard to overcome, especially in an environment that's telling you, no, 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 you are the problem, or your culture is the problem. And so I hope that as you continue your work and your research is shared, that will help drive policy, because we cannot just look at this through the lens of fixes and ask folks, go to the fix. We created the fix for you, go to it. We have to help people heal.
Absolutely, thank you for that. Absolutely.
And I echo everything that's been said. The one thing I want to add is, Ms. Logan mentioned dysregulation and how dysregulation shows up in these public settings. But people experience trauma that shows up at work. And so the question is, like, how can we get employers engaged who are saying they want to do DE&I, right, and talk about trauma and how trauma impacts frontline workers and how you can support frontline managers in addressing those experiences. So folks aren't getting fired, right? So folks can have an opportunity to actually, advance in their place of work without these things staying on their resumes. So I think that's something that I think is very important to this work as well.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
if I
sir.
may I recommend some reading, Resmaa Menakem, R-E-S-M-A-A, Menakem, M-E-N-A-K-E-M, My Grandmother's Hands. Black Fragility, Adrian Carter. Black Rednecks and White Liberals by Sewell. Crisis in the Village by Robert Franklin. I think you do you good. And one last book, of The Color of Law by Rothstein. That's a must read. All right.
Thank you
And
very
then for those who want to do something in your spare time, from Superman to Man by J.A. Rogers.
All right, thank you.
I
Yes.
got a question.
Yeah, please.
I actually want to thank all of you for the tremendous heartfelt work that you're doing. It's critically important. I don't have to tell you that. You're all heroes in my book. I just wanted to understand sort of what's the long-term plan for this, or end game? I mean, so you're going to have these 4, 5, 6 sessions. Akron's doing a report. This is a conversation that clearly needs to, in my estimation, happen for many years to come. Because when you are talking about changing culture, that is a long-term proposition. So just curious to know how much you continue to tell the story, communicate the importance of this work long after these discussions take place.
So what we're going to do is, all the information that we're gathering from these conversations, from beginning to end, the smaller conversations feed into that larger conversation. What we're doing is, we're going to take those lived experiences, take those stories, and we're going to shape them into policy, procedure, training for our officers, so that when they're responding to our community, they are responding in a more trauma-informed way, right? So our commissioners, they now have final authority. It's powerful. Final authority in training and policy for our police department. The community's voice gets to be in those new policies and those new trainings so that it is more reflective of community value and the way that we want to see policing happen in our neighborhoods. So that is long-term end game for us.
Great.
And not speaking for the commission, but we hope to continue this because we want to change the narrative and the culture.
If I could just add one quick thing, because we're running out of time. As a safety director, one of the things I'm challenged with, because you know Maple Heights history, is police reform. So I'll reach out to the county council, for how do I use this as I address my 30-some officers who do not look like me? And the challenge is Black and brown people are arrested at disproportionate rates. And we've got these pursuits that we're reviewing and officer-involved shooting. So hopefully it's a document that those elected officials who do have that responsibility are able to use it in a way to really make some transformative change that we are elected to represent. So thank you.
Thank you again. A conversation we're not going to complete today, I know that. But Dr. Gullett, please, just a few comments on your report. Move into it if you can. And
My report, the health,
Yes, yes,
okay. So I'm just speaking on behalf of the Health and Healthcare Subcommittee for CACE, and one of the updates we have for this particular time is the community health assessment that happens every 3 years here in Cuyahoga County was completed at the end of 2022, and that feeds a community health improvement plan that's 3 years in length. So this is for 2023, 2024, and 2025 for the entire county. I'm just gonna go back for a couple minutes. I know we're close on time, but I kind of want to give you just a brief context. This work started back in 2009, in large part Greg Brown at Policy Bridge is a huge leader in this, as were many other leaders in our community, starting with place matters, understanding the role of place in the impact on health. That had transformed over a number of years and a ton of work into what we now know as Health Improvement Partnership Cuyahoga, or HIP Cuyahoga. And what that is a community collaboration of our health departments and hospital systems and multiple other community organizations to come together instead of doing individual health assessments, needs assessments every few years, spend a lot of money hiring external consultants who don't understand our community, don't understand racial equity, to come in and tell us what to do. And instead, we came together over many years and now do community health assessments together as one group. So we now are doing those on a 3-year cycle, and that is somewhat aligned with the state health assessment and state health improvement plan. So all of the local jurisdictions in the state of Ohio that have health departments have to do an assessment and a plan, and it has to link to what the state of Ohio Health Department assessment and plan is also telling us needs to be done. So there are a lot of compliance issues here, and et cetera, and if you want to know about those, I'm happy to talk to you offline. But what I wanted to bring to this group is that back in 2015, and the longstanding members have heard me talk about this, but back in 2015 was the first time that we as a community, Cuyahoga County, declared eliminating structural racism as our first and foundational key component of a community health improvement plan. That's the first time we publicly said this is the upstream driver of health differences, inequities in this community, and those are unjust, preventable, and we can fix them if we fix the system that was created in the way that it currently operates, that disadvantages people of color. In this particular community, it is particularly anti-Black racism, not to the exclusion of other groups who have been vulnerable and oppressed, but that is specifically what we've been focusing on. So that has been the foundation of the repeated health assessments that we've done since 2015. And those health assessments are looking at publicly available data like life expectancy and infant mortality, but also taking thousands of quality of life surveys on an interval basis so that we understand what are the most pressing issues in the community. Also doing a number of key stakeholder interviews, focus groups throughout the county, as well as lots of sessions where people weigh in about what are the most pressing issues. A few years ago, we also did a Youth Photo Voice project. So I wanted to just give you an idea of the complexity of the data that goes into these assessments, and then It's a facilitated process where community members decide what needs to be done in the improvement plan, along with our hospitals and our health departments. They have requirements to remain their IRS exemption, the hospitals do. Metro Health is not a part of that. Metro Health's a part of the system. They don't have an IRS exemption as a not-for-profit hospital, but the others do, meaning they have a requirement to serve the community. And so what we have really focused on is bringing everyone together to recognize the impact of structural racism, and that all of us, including our hospitals as huge employers, need to understand what that looks like in the community. So our newest assessment was released at the end of 2020, and I'll make sure that you guys have it. But the top health needs, and I'm just going to read these quickly and then tell you what was identified for the plan: affordable and accessible healthcare, access to healthy food, behavioral health, including mental health, drug use, misuse, and trauma was a huge part of that. Community safety, economic concerns, education, environmental health, maternal, fetal, and infant health, older adult population, and then of course structural institutional racism as the foundation of what we know is causing the inequities in this community and health. So what we've identified as, not we, but the community identified as the big picture issues to focus on are access to healthy food for the next 3 years, community safety, in particular focused on violence and the impact of trauma, and affordable and accessible healthcare and behavioral health services. And then the fourth is eliminating structural racism. So the way that this works is we typically have in this case, we have 4 work groups that are forming right now that build on the prior work, open to any community members who wish to be a part of it. And we push that work forward. We're submitting a federal grant right now that will hopefully fund a bunch of this work, has been funded the last 10 years. But this is the kind of work that's really important to understand what's happening in lots of different parts of the community that can come together. So we're not siloing these initiatives in little pockets, but we're saying, look, structural racism is the underlying issue here, and it's huge, and it's been 400 plus years. We're not gonna undo it overnight, but we actually have to work together and think about changing the system while we meet people's immediate needs, while we understand what the trauma is, while people get the vocabulary to describe their trauma and the gaslighting stops. While we get people who look like me to understand that this is real trauma, it exists, and that this is really impacting people's health and their longevity. So this is all new. The health improvement plan will be published here very, very soon. It's written, it's almost published. So I'll make sure you all have it, but I wanna make sure that the CACE knows that you can engage. The county has sent lots of different people from county government to be part of these committees in the past. But I also want to make sure that this gets to you guys. And one of the things that came out of the last round of work in the systems mapping that I talked about earlier is that perspective transformation is something Policy Bridge has led for a long time, which is helping everyone across different demographics understand the importance of racial equity as a shared value. And what does that mean for you as an individual, as a leader in your organization, as a community member, regardless of where you are, where you come from? What does that mean for you? But the other thing that grew out of that, and this was a number of different community group model building sessions with lots of different people across the county, was racial trauma and healing. That without that as the foundation of addressing structural racism, we're not going to be able to undo the systems and structures that continue to create oppression. And so we need to figure out what are those things. And what you're doing is a perfect example of a grassroots way of addressing that. And so I wanted to just reiterate my admiration for what you're doing, but also to link it to some other data that's come out of our county and other efforts to say this has to happen. And there are a lot of other programs happening that are also amazing, and so it's sort of raising the awareness and making sure that we're all kind of focused on that same end goal. And I think that this group is full of people who are, but there are a lot of people in our community who aren't. And so we need to understand how we get the message to those folks too. All right, Terry, sorry it took a lot of time.
It's okay. It's an important component of what we just heard over the last 40 minutes or so. Again, more to come, right? It was important that we have this conversation for a series of reasons. We knew we weren't going to solve it today, but you are looking for support, and if we have a few moments at the end of this, we will talk about what that support may look like. So thank you, every one of you. We do appreciate it, and these were words that were critical to this entire conversation. So you're free to leave if you'd like, or you can stay, certainly. All right. I do want to hear from Human Resources in just a moment, if there's a few moment report from HR.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Coleman. I'm an HR manager with our Cuyahoga County Department of Human Resources. And I just wanted to give you an update on, we have an internal diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that I'm the co-chair of. And I wanted to give an update of what we've been working on to you guys on behalf of our interim director, Ms. Sheba Martin. So we started our committee last year. And in the beginning, we came up with a bi-monthly newsletter that we put out countywide to our employees. We do this to keep our leadership engaged, keep employees engaged, and able to drive initiatives of DEI through the county. So we've done newsletters, we've highlighted women's health issues, Women's History Month, Black History Month, Pride Month. We may spotlight individuals. We actually last July, we spotlighted Dr. Motlin for his work with men's health throughout the community and a disparity in healthcare in our communities. So we also, next month, went to the Moss Museum. We took a tour. They have a wonderful exhibit. The activist photographers from the civil rights, we're going to spotlight that for our employees next month, starting our newsletter, talk about their work as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and just to highlight the reach throughout Cuyahoga County, not just at our actual job, the reach throughout Cuyahoga County as it relates to DEI efforts. And one of the things that we started this year, and the county executive role name left, but we started a conversation event, a series called Can We Talk? Conversations as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. And our first panel was Clerk Byrd, County Executive Ronayne, and Council President Jones. And we talked about why Black History Month still matters. And it was a breathtaking event. I was the moderator. I've never moderated. I watched like 60 minutes of 60 Minutes the weekend before so I could, know what to say. But they made it sound like people who watched it, you sounded like you were talking to them in your kitchen. So I think our group was inspired. I think the employees throughout the county were inspired. We got a really, really good feedback from it. And we want to keep it going. We want to have additional conversations, hopefully to create some changes to maybe some policies like we're discussing today. I think we're going to look at something towards the middle of the end of the year as it relates to just voting in the county. What is voting? How do you register? Just something to put that out there because your vote is your voice. And talking to the people at the Moss Museum and just going through those photographs of people who struggled to even get the right to vote, and to see that we have 25% voter turnout in past elections. So those are just some of the things that we want to work with in our committee for the Department of Human Resources, and hopefully we can foster some change through some of our policies. Some things we did do, we started a tuition reimbursement program, so that has helped with some of the inequity with some of the positions as it relates to having the educational background. So we'll keep in contact, give you some report outs. I work closely with the clerk, and she's doing great things, and you guys are all doing great things. And so just thank you for the opportunity to just share a little bit about what we've been doing.
So is the Can We Talk in turn just for county employees?
Yes, so we did live stream it.
we live streamed, so it was open to outside. It was in the council chambers. So as we get closer to having another one, we'll make sure to do a bigger broadcast of what we're gonna do and when it's gonna be.
Thank you. I'm
I
sorry,
would say
Councilwoman.
voting is important, but also you could look at the dynamics. Can we talk and what we're all trying to do, getting information out and educating people. So if it's live stream, take some of the resources that we have in housing development and economic development, talking about the FBE and MBE and things like that. So you're like a mechanism already
Get the
set up.
information
Get
out.
the information out and have that as a series, so it relates, everything has to relate to everything that we're doing. We're just trying to connect the dots.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for that report, Ms. Coleman. We are obviously running short on time. I'm going to ask Ms. Grimes, Mr. McShepard, and Mr. Cavaness to interrupt me as I talk about a meeting that we had with the subcommittee chairs earlier this year. In that meeting, we were talking about these funds that are available to CACE for use. And out of that discussion, yes, we talked about the funds. We want your input before we make decisions that we ultimately send to the county executive for consideration. But there are a few other things that we discussed. One was a meeting schedule or a meeting schedule format. Our thinking is this: each of the groups below, whether they're subcommittees, they would meet before a meeting of the subcommittee chairs, and then that quarter the entire CACE would meet. So in other words, what I'm saying is we're going to try to create a series of discussions where subcommittee chairs meet, the committees themselves will meet, and then we will have a full CACE committee meeting. That way there's a better understanding of what's going on, there's more sharing, et cetera. So that is one of the format changes we're thinking about, unless I've misrepresented it to the folks here. We're going to try to schedule some high priority meetings. Once again, we heard from the county executive. We're going to get together as subcommittee chairs to meet with the county executive. It could be virtual, what have you. We just want to have that sit down conversation to go through some of the details that we're going to suggest to the county executive for spending. And then, as we talked about spending, we don't know if we can hire a lobbyist, but just name it something different, right? How do we create more influence in Columbus and other places as a part of this case? We've written letters. The county executive has talked about legislation in the offing. So how do we make our voice a little louder in those conversations? And have more community events. Our communications chair will talk about those things at some point. And if not a lobbyist, what sort of consultancy should we engage to do some work for us, whether it's in writing or advice that we might benefit from? So more to come on that, right? It's not all the money in the world, but it is a pool of dollars that will help us advance this work, we think, in a more meaningful way. Andy, Biba, Stephen, anything you want to add, Heidi, to that conversation? Okay.
Can you share with county council what that ask is?
Yes, 100%. And we should and we will. You approved it, the fund, so absolutely. Anything on GARE you want to talk about?
Yeah, really quick, and it'll be 2 seconds. As you guys know, we're a member of the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. We usually attend the monthly meetings, and I report back due to time, a lot of times via email. SCARE did not have a monthly meeting in December, and beginning in 2023, they restructured their meeting cadence and eliminated monthly membership meetings. So no GARE monthly membership meetings to report out on. On April 12th, there's going to be a quote-unquote GARE conversations, and I'll provide an update after that.
Okay. 2 other quick things. Ms. Mockabee, we would love to have a discussion with RAFSTY when the time comes. We will work on trying to get our schedules together, whether it's the leadership, our subcommittee chairs, the 5 pillars. I think you have 5 pillars that you, those 5 pillars, our subcommittee chairs. That'd be a wonderful conversation to have. And the next thing is about leadership, right, within CACE. Some of us have been at this from the beginning. We're going to have some transition, as we talked about, as we should. It's a healthy part of this process. So if you want more, right, or to do more, or to be on a different committee, or to add another committee to the work, please, and I'll say it again, please, let me know. Let Naila know, and we will figure out ways to put your good minds to work, okay? Anything else?
I have a question. How many open seats do we have?
2 currently.
And then do we know by chance what subcommittee
As he said.
He needs a friend.
India obviously ran the justice, and we had Victor on justice and
Victor was on.
communications as well, so we'll send out a list. Let's just do that. Let's send out a
You want
list.
me to send out a list? Yeah.
Who's on which committee right now? All right. Anything else?
Might not be a bad idea, Chairman, to consider, in some cases, establishing sort of community advisory committees that can buttress or support the work of these standing committees. So
Interesting.
I'm thinking about, if you were to focus on, let's say, mental health and trauma, that kind of can fall under health, but what we just heard is a very large, fast-moving train that will require. And just one idea that came to mind as I listened to them and listened to your comments is, they mentioned Walter, who's doing ghetto therapy, so I know him. So he's working full-time for a nonprofit. He grew up in the projects. He knows most of the people in the projects and just felt comfortable enough to say, I want to pull people together to have these conversations because people seem like they need healing, right? So what he does is, and he's done it maybe a couple years now, but people religiously come. They say it's 40, 50 plus people that come religiously to sit in on these sessions, but the challenge is a wonderful group of social workers come to listen to these people and to hear their stories and to offer them, advice and counsel, but they're all doing it as donated time. So a few of us were saying, well, those social workers should be paid for that kind of, certainly if they're coming month after month, why should they have to donate their time when we say this work is so important to these communities, right, and to our community? So those are the kinds of things that might, warrant some additional sort of ad hoc or subcommittee work that could support. And I don't know if that requires, because I know this is sort of a legislative body appointed by the council, but it just may be a great way to have additional input as we talk about people, needing to go deeper into the community and have the everyday citizen feel like they're a part of this process.
So I think that's it, other than we do have terms. Remember, we were all appointed, most of us, unless you were filling a term in August of a few years ago. So we're coming up to we're coming up to that period. So some folks will cycle off. We try to stagger terms. We did a lot of different things to make this fair and have it resemble a situation where you weren't just on case forever, right? If you had other things you wanted to be a part of. So we will provide more details in that regard as well coming up. All right, just something for you to think about. All right, appreciate it. We are adjourned.
I will.
Always enjoy you guys.